Welcome to the Igniting the CEO Within podcast, where we interview successful high-level professionals to discover lessons they've learned throughout their career that can help ignite that CEO within you. I'm Mark McFatridge, and I'll be your host for the next 15 minutes or so. Our show is sponsored by Quaid, a nationwide community of CEOs and entrepreneurs. Quaid has developed Launchpad, which offers an opportunity for experienced executive coaches to become licensed circle directors. After completing the Launchpad program, you'll lead your own peer advisory circles, helping other CEOs and entrepreneurs excel in their professional and personal lives while providing a community of accountability, challenge, and support. If you'd like to learn more, go to quaidcircle.com. Really excited about our show today. I get to hang out with Jim OBrien. He's an executive consultant out of St. Louis, Missouri. Jim, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Hey, look, in your line of work, you've had exposure, and your entire career, really, you've had exposure to a bunch of different companies and a bunch of different leaders. If you were to start to break it down into what separates the really good ones from the not so good ones, what would that look like?
I think the folks that have been the most effective are the ones that realize that, and I think this comes with experience, and it takes time in the seat. They realize that it's not about them. The real leaders that make a difference are, and we hear this term thrown around a lot, but the servant leader. The person
Mhm.
that is there to serve their folks. This whole concept of the upside down pyramid, where really the most important folks in the company are usually the ones that are the most overlooked. So, think in context of financial services, I just finished a long period at a Christian, not a mission-oriented financial institution, and the folks that were most important in the company were the ones actually helping lead the company, dealing with our customers, helping them grow and expand. If my CEO had left, the company would have continued to function.
Mhm.
If I was let go or was no longer there, the company would function. But those folks that are often the most overlooked, the ones actually serving the customers, if they're not there, you don't have a company anymore. Your mission is gone. So I think it's just realizing that it's not all about you, and you're really there to create an environment and support your folks in a way where you're leveraging their skills and putting them in the right place at the right time to be effective, and then recognizing that nothing is static. The only
Mhm.
constant in life is change, and just being able to recognize the signs and recognize when you need to make an adjustment. The mistake I see a lot of newer leaders make is they substitute a high operational tempo, or they substitute making a bunch of changes as progress, and so they equate everything. Oh, I know we're very busy, and I remember COVID in particular. I was working with a very large international, a globally food and agriculture lender. And I remember before COVID, we would get, folks measured their worth by how many meetings they attended in a day. Well, I was in 8 meetings today, and I was 9 hours, and COVID hit. And what happened? Well, we didn't get fewer meetings. People realized, well, we could just have a half-hour meeting, and instead of 8 meetings, we went to 16. So, a lot of newer leaders are folks that they confuse movement and momentum and chaos with progress. So, and that's a tough lesson to learn. And unfortunately, a lot of performance plans and a lot of performance management systems reward kind of frantic energy versus let's take a step back. The whole concept of slowing down to speed up. And so I think just watching leaders as they grow, and they recognize that, hey, I'm really here to make this environment for somebody else and to create a culture that actually continues to drive things even without me here. And that's I think that's really what differentiates the really good leaders from the ones that just bounce around a lot.
Yeah, Jim, I like both of those points. I think we can almost tie it together because we're seeing a lot of that today when you start looking at companies that are very focused on efficiencies. And, depending on how it's presented, it can come off as what you were talking about of we're going to make change to make change. When in reality, whether it's implementing an artificial intelligence program, or we're really just looking to optimize our talent. While it could be viewed as making change to make change, it's actually putting, in some cases, if done right, it's actually putting people first, right? Where you're going to optimize their time and their energies to focus on what they do well. Are you seeing that in some of the work that you're doing too?
As I've shifted over the last few years to more mission-oriented organizations that have a purpose behind what they do, you see that more and more that there's more of an alignment about the people and what they're doing and being aligned. Having a job that aligns with their values and being more people-oriented. And when things get tough, that the challenge is that has to be, you've got to have executive commitment, you've got to have board commitment, you've got to have senior leadership commitment, and that is a transformation sometimes that can
Mhm.
take. It's not measured in months or weeks. I mean, that could be measured in years. But I have seen that transformation work, and I have seen when organizations truly embrace it and focus on their people and put things in place the correct way, it does turn into tangible results. Whether it's increased performance, efficiencies, happier people. It's funny when I walk into a new group and I'm doing an assessment or I'm helping with an org structure or technology roadmap. You get a sense just walking into a team. But how happy are they? Are they joking around? Are they having fun versus
Mhm.
walking into a group where it's just a wet blanket and everyone's afraid to pop their head over the cube wall and talk to the person next to them. And there's scientific research that shows, those happy teams are sometimes on the order of 40 to 50% more productive. And it seems counterintuitive, but if you have that culture, you support the folks, they feel like they've been heard, it makes a huge difference. And I think too, what a lot of folks don't realize is there's a huge generational change happening right now. If
Mhm.
you look at right now, I think we've just teetered over the edge of. I guess I'm a Gen Xer. The Gen Z, the millennials, they're taking over, and they have a much different value system than we did. It's I remember working for managers who had their formidable careers in the 70s and 80s, and it was a different leadership style. And I think we also just need to embrace the fact that they want different things. And I listen to Simon Sinek a lot, like a lot of folks, and
Yeah.
I love his presentations on start with why, and then how do you work with millennials and motivate them. And the reality is we're having to introduce structure and help teach them how to operate in the business world. And that's and I've seen a lot of conflicts. You've got late stage career folks who just throw their hands up and don't want to change and help these new folks come up. And then you've got those that embrace it and
Mhm.
they understand the value that those newer employees bring. They help them set proper expectations. They give them some structure. They let them fail, because a lot of these younger folks, they don't know what it's like to fail. They've always
Mhm.
been kind of propped up. They've always had these compensation networks, and as well as I do, when you get into a real business, those things fall to the side. So I'm probably rambling there a little bit, but I do see that shift happening and mission oriented, and then embracing those younger generations and really helping them get what they need.
Yeah, I like that. I want to come back to the generational thing, but before that, you moving and focusing a little bit more on mission driven
Yeah.
entities. How did that come about? And I ask that because technically everybody's got a mission statement, right? They've got it posted on their wall and all that kind of stuff. But tell me the difference between the type of organizations that you're spending time with, these mission really driven folks, and somebody having a mission statement on their wall, and the difference between those two.
Yeah, there's a very stark difference, and it has to come down to motivation and creating a culture where people help buy in and actually want to make things better. So, I've worked at extremely large corporations, for-profit healthcare, manufacturing, distribution, ag. Everyone has. I think everyone's motivated to want to try to make things better and do a good job, and everyone wants to be recognized and rewarded. The big difference and why I chose to move into more of the mission oriented organizations is you've got a built-in advantage because it's easy to motivate and inspire people. If you're a mission oriented organization, whether so I'm as an avocation, for my vocation, I do executive coaching, org assessments. I've been a CIO, a COO, CTO, and worked in large corporations, but avocation, I'm a fire chief of a small rural volunteer fire department, so I get to put that hat on. And it's very easy at 2 in the morning when you've got a group of people standing outside a house that's burning. There's literally a burning home. We're going to make it go away. So that's instantly tangible. The mission's right in front of you.
Yeah.
Working in a healthcare setting, if having a technology team that is trying to build an application, it's easy to connect them to their mission. You take them to a hospital, say, hey, we're going to hang out with this nurse and we're going to see what she does, and you're going to experience and understand why the tools or the things you're making matter to her and matter to the patient sitting in the bed that has a better outcome because you took the time to understand it. And they come back and motivates them for a year. Recently at the Christian financial organization I work for, our mission was to build churches and schools and to help folks in impoverished communities. And again, uh, to motivate folks, it was you went out to the churches, you went out to the communities, and you saw the difference that you were making. So for me, I encompass, I'm a big fan of the people process technology model. You've got to get the people right. They've got to be ready for change. You got to have the right people in the right seats, and then figure out what you're going to do with them. What is the current process is not working? What do we want it to be? And then finally, stick the technology over the top. The technology should be an accelerator and an enabler, not. But that's unfortunately that's also the shiny nickel, the bright and shiny object, and people are. It's easier to just think I'm going to go buy this. I'm going to spend a $500,000 on a tool, and that's going to fix everything. So going to a mission oriented org, you can get the people right, and you usually have the support, and you can motivate and push them and inspire them into the right area, which is hugely helpful. Yeah. And it's more
Yeah.
fun. Who doesn't want to work for a place that's making the world a better?
Yep. Yep. No, I love that. I think that's really good. It's funny. I literally had that conversation yesterday about, people buying technology and then making their processes fit the technology. And it should be the other way around, right? Let's figure out who we are, what we do, how we do it, and then find support from the technology to help drive that. Yeah. I thank you for sharing that thoughts on the mission driven companies. I think you're exactly right. And the cool thing is, it doesn't have to be a religious based organization. It doesn't have to be a whatever. Any organization can actually do that, right? As long as they understand. And getting back to Simon Sinek, what is the why? Why are we here? What are we doing? How are we doing it? Why are we doing it? And can we get a bunch of people that believe in that why and
Yeah.
support it and make sure that every action that we have supports why we're doing what we're doing? And every organization can do that.
Everyone wants to be part of something bigger and they want to contribute to something important. And I think it's reinforced with the generation that's taking over. I mean, that's their reason for being. It's
Hmm.
no longer about, and it's funny in the US, like so I've had I've been blessed to work in a lot of global settings. When you talk to someone from Australia and you introduce yourself, they don't tell you what they do. They tell you what they like, what their beliefs are, what they
Hmm.
love, what they struggle with. In the U.S., what's our typical response? Hi, I'm Jim. Nice to meet you. I'm the chief operating officer of such and such.
Yep.
We that is changing now. And I that is for the leaders that understand that and can embrace it and leverage that huge motivational factor and create the environment where you are contributing to something. And you can do it in a large corporation. I mean,
Hmm.
you just have to be able to connect the dots. 5 degrees of Kevin Bacon. 5 degrees of how what you're doing makes a difference, and how do you
Yeah.
link that? Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, no, that's really good stuff. Jim, as we start to wrap this up a little bit, think back to 21-year-old Jim. What's one thing that you wish 21-year-old Jim would have known that you've learned over the years?
So 21-year-old Jim, I can literally my 21st birthday, I was 500 feet underwater in the North Atlantic on a submarine, puking into a trash can because we were uh, getting ready to transit into Scotland. So the one thing I would have told 21-year-old Jim is stay off the damn submarine. But I guess it's too late. Um, the big thing, and I think as you age, and reality is our brains are never changing. So that I mean, I lived through that environment where that frontal cortex just hasn't figured out risk versus self-preservation, um, and and understanding balance. So something that's influenced me greatly on my own journey is the concept of managing polarities.
Mhm.
So there's always a balance. There's always a middle ground, and that can come across in leadership. Sometimes people think you're weak because you consider both sides and you don't have an immediate gut reaction. But the reality is just understanding the balance in life, and taking time to reflect, and being in a very high op tempo execution oriented environment like a submarine, you're taught and supported and encouraged to make very quick, literally life saving decisions. Taking understanding now, and just, hey, take a pause. Sometimes that breath that you take is the thing that gives you the mental clarity. Shuts down that amygdala, allows that frontal cortex to do what it's supposed to do. Just understanding that there is always balance in all things, and trying to figure out what the pluses and the minuses, the what each side of those polarities mean. And that's something that I wish I could have injected into my brain when I was 21.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. Hey, do me a favor. You talked a little bit about some of the things that you do. What does a typical engagement with you look like, and most importantly, how can people get a hold of you?
Sure. So typically, I have kind of an informal network. I don't advertise. I've had full time roles as well as coaching and just consultative roles. Typically, it's a company that is struggling with how to do strategic change, how to, just the concept of having a strategic plan is very challenging for some organizations. And the reality is there is no perfect way to do it. It all depends on where the organization is. Are they
Hmm.
needing foundational change? Are they accelerating? So really helping them understand where you are in your life cycle. What is the goal that you're trying to achieve? And then what is the most effective way to plan to get there? For some companies, it's as basic as I need a 2-year foundational strategic plan that gets me to the point that I can now accelerate and do meaningful stuff. Because companies struggle with technology, debt, leadership challenges, high, turnover, very tenured employees, understanding where they are with change resistance. So oftentimes it's companies that are just trying to figure out where they want to go next. And what I do is give a structure and a process for them to figure that out. And then depending on the dynamics of the organization, the board, the who their stakeholders are, their constituents, it's trying to create that whole environment and understand all of those stakeholders and all of those pieces that that build where they want to go. And I've done some individual coaching for folks that are trying to accelerate or just trying to understand what they want to be when they grow up,
Hmm.
and how to deal with the politics, and especially for these younger folks, how do I operate in a corporate world, because they've never really been taught, and they're not used to failing, and to teach them, hey, it's okay, you don't know everything, and it may take 20 years, but let me help you put some basic tools in place to figure that out. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. And then how can people get a hold of you?
Sure. So best way is just to email me. It's jimo@jimoent.com. Just a simple email. I'm on LinkedIn. Find the reach out. Building a engagement page now so that folks can go out to jimoent.com and uh, call me or engage me for any services they need help with.
Love it. Jim, thanks for hanging out with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you too, Mark. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, y'all. We did it again. We found another amazing leader. Appreciate Jim joining us and sharing his wisdom and insights. As we wrap up, want to remind you that Igniting the CEO Within is sponsored by Quaid, a nationwide community of CEOs and entrepreneurs. Quaid has created Launchpad, which provides an opportunity for experienced executive coaches to become licensed circle directors and significantly impact the lives of CEOs and entrepreneurs. To find out more, visit quaidcircle.com. Until next time, keep igniting that CEO within you. I'm Mark McFatridge. Thanks for listening.